As I always am, I am thankful that you've come back again. You're joining with us again here on this special Spirit Watch live stream that we're doing on, it's our next chapter on all things that we can view through the Xenosverse. And the Xenosverse is everything, all things Xenos/dwell. And as those who may be unfamiliar with that, strange acronyms, the Xenos/dwell movement is the moniker we use to describe a very abusive church movement that comes off as being squeaky clean and completely orthodox and beneficial and just as community connected as any other church might be down the street. But this is specifically the Xenos Dwell movement in Columbus, Ohio, which, as we have seen for many, many years, is not what it cracks itself up to be. And on our podcasts here through Spiritwatch Ministries and through other websites and other very daring media ventures that we've seen over the past few years, through protests, through all kinds of personal activism, if I use the word. We've seen all kinds of people really voice from their hearts, from their minds, protests as to how this church really conducts itself. And it takes the form of a church, which is obviously the most supposedly harmless thing in the community you'd think would be around. And unfortunately, too many people I've learned have certainly can beg to differ with that. There's an established history of just unbelievable amounts of religious abuse, cultic activity, mind control, and just flat out meanness being done in the name of God and religion that I think needs to be examined. And that's what we've been doing. We've had testimonies such as Oliver. Oliver, it's good to see you again. We had Oliver on here sharing with us in a podcast and some of our past Xenos verses about the nature of his experience. And the thing is that, we have had all kinds of people on sharing uniformly almost the same story, all kinds of individuals from all kinds of different backgrounds who have shared the same things and have declared very openly that Xenos truly is not what it claims to be. It claims to be this very cutting edge, very wonderful engine of evangelism for the kingdom of God. And really all it has really come down to become a very contrived kind of pecking order in a very, very toxic social setting. And every one of the people here on tonight here who have been here before, also in other venues, can certainly share their own stories and have gone on record on that in a powerful way. I'm grateful to see Julie and Katie and Desiree. I'm so glad to see you join us tonight, and I really appreciate the stands you've taken. And so we have, of course, been enjoined by truth and conscience to give an alternate perspective as to what this church really is about. But at the same time, and that's what our evening is going to be about. We've wanted to do this episode for a long time, but we've also wanted to give an opportunity for us to reflect upon, what is it about Xenos that really people could come away with that would make them want to miss it. What was beneficial about that experience, for lack of a better word? I mean, why would people want to get, what's the word? Sentimental, nostalgic about leaving a place, or about having left and coming and looking back and say, yes, I saw how terrible it was and I couldn't handle it anymore. But there's things they feel within themselves. They just look back at and say, it gives them, it causes, I think, a certain amount of reflection and even confusion as to think about, what really was so bad about it. And really a cult or any kind of abusive movement can't be 100% evil. It's a very human organization. There are certainly a lot of egregious and horrible things that go on in them, but there's also things that I think you can certainly look back and say, well, that really did help me, and I that really did something that really did help me grow a little bit, or at least move through life a little better. And there's people that will spend the rest of their life thinking that, well, what did I leave behind? They'll seek the rest of their life trying to capture something that they saw that was beneficial, something that was good for them there. And I think it's because there were some things in there that perhaps were helpful. And we want to discuss that, because I want to ask you guys to kind of help me explore that, because you, like I said, you've been demonized by so many people thinking that you're just these horrible, vicious anti-Christian losers who just want to see the church pulled down, who want to see the spiritual world overturned that they're setting up there in Xenos. But at the same time, we all know how far that propaganda goes, and I know you all to be good people, of good morals, of good character, and people who really care about the folks that are still within the movement. And so, what would you say were some of those trends that you saw that helped, and how would you want to? I mean, what was it? I mean, what was it about that really drew you, and that even today you can look back and maybe say, well, that really, those were some of the good parts. Those are some of the good parts. These are some of the things that we could connect with people on. Maybe when you can jump in and maybe share that, but and then just freely share, interact. Let's see what we have to say. I have all kinds of questions. I could have a list here I could pull, but I like to see really what was it about Xenos that really to you might have been something that was worth looking back at.
Well, for me, I was a senior in high school, and my family was chaotic. I knew I was moving out of my home when I was graduating, but I didn't know where I was going. And one thing that Xenos did for me at that time is that they gave me some stability. I immediately had an opportunity to live with the deacon. Like, deacons in the organization are called home church leaders back then. And the deacon and wife, they had only been married, less than a year, but they still were like throwing the door open. You have no place to live, you can live here. And I really am thankful for those people in my life at that time, because they did give me an opportunity to have some sanity, some stability, and actually some parenting, because I wasn't, at 17, I wasn't quite ready to launch.
Right. So there are places of refuge. Yeah, that's important, because when you're coming out of a chaos like that, that's it just seems stable, and in many cases, it is. I'm sorry, I walked all over you. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I think my situation was very similar. I was, I think, 15 or 16, probably 16, when I started coming around. My family situation was really, really negative. I was homeschooled and did not have an education, had not done any sort of, learning for years and years and years. And I didn't feel confident to go to college. I didn't, when you're homeschooled, there's a lot of apprehension when it comes to like meeting people and building relationships. As a really lonely kid. And when we stumbled into some people when we were camping, and they went to Xenos, and we went, it did provide a lot. It provided an outlet. It provided a way out of my house, and it provided me people my own age to talk with and to develop relationships with, and provided me a focus too. When I was really, really hopeless in terms of like trying to figure out what it meant to be an adult and what it meant to grow up and what it meant to be responsible and what the next steps for me in life were. And it was a good stepping stone towards that. It really did give me some hope and set me on the path of, going to college, moving out, becoming more independent, getting a job, all of those type of things. I don't even think I had my driver's license when I started going to Xenos. I think one of the youth leaders, Aaron Phelps, taught me how to drive, so, everything from balancing a checkbook to driving a car. I had none of those skills developed,
Right.
just because my home situation was so.
Yeah.
Sort of schooling, there's a lot of insecurity about life.
Right. And so you're just around people that, like I said, women themselves, they are caring people, they do want to reach out. They do want to make a difference. And I think Xenos, that's the great tragedy of it all. I mean, there's such a good premise, a great set of claims, mounted upon the goodwill of a lot of great people wanting to really do right. And yet with the strings attached, which we won't get into right now, but they really want to do right. And that's what community should be, that's what it should be all about. And so anyway, I don't want to be editorializing, but you go ahead.
The crazy. Oh, who's not? Somebody else.
Go ahead, Desiree. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the crazy thing about is that all of the former members, pretty much that I've talked to, or any kind of social media discussions, everybody seems to agree that Xenos teaches great. They're like, if you went to only their first tier teachings that don't have any of the weird culture yet, it's just so unfortunate that they have these other things going on to ruin that, to ruin a very educational, scholarly church. Church.
Yeah.
And to build off of what Desi just said, I can remember, I was in a home church with her, and I can remember some of the first times I came out, I literally could not communicate, and I could not put my thoughts out there and say what was on my heart or speak in any sort of intelligible way, and to other people. And I can remember just the way that the teachings were done and the structure and the way that, it moved from premise, and the way that things built logically provided a framework, for me to follow things and me to kind of understand, this is what it means to, communicate an idea. This is what it means to illuminate, a thought and that sort of thing. I thought that was one of the things that stuck out to me, is wow, these people are really not only articulate and charismatic, but I'm learning and how to write a paper in school, and this is how I would want to write a paper. So it was really, really good stuff, in terms of providing you good ideas and on how to communicate ideas. So
yeah,
I remember, actually, in terms of learning basic communication skills, I was very shy, and one of the women home group leaders sat down on the front porch with me and taught me how to have a conversation. Right, they're ask me 3 questions, and I'm like, what? I can't, what, but there's that time and that patience and that you can say that it's in service of these other things, but these are genuine connections that people make, and they take the time to invest in,
right.
Young adults. I was 19, and I needed friends, and I wanted community, and I wanted a church. And I came to OSU as a freshman, and the dorms were full. So I got stuck in alone on 15th Avenue, and I didn't know anyone in the city. I didn't have any family or friends or connections in Columbus. I had taken a year off after high school, and I was evangelical. I went to a youth missions agency and like was out there trying to save the world, and then felt really guilty about coming to college. And then found actually the person who walked me across the oval, the introductory day at OSU, asked me if I had a church and invited me out. And so from that was my first connection, right? And the contrast between like even trying to find a campus ministry versus like I needed connections where people didn't disappear over Christmas break, right? Like, and Xenos provided that family connection, community connection. Like by the end of my freshman year, I had moved into a ministry house, and I mean, I'm grateful. Like I love my roommates. I loved them then. I love them now. You know, like there was a breach. Like there were obviously like painful times where those friendships were broken, but I have gotten incredible friendships and relationships. I mean, it is why it is so painful and hard to leave. And why I'm so grateful to be connecting with people that have left. You know, I now have an amazing community of 500 people who have left Xenos and Dwell, who I just like, they do draw in people. And what drew in me was that genuine desire to be with people who really were just trying to work it out and wanted to follow God and wanted to like learn. And there is a time and a place for a high commitment, you know, Christian experience. And I was there for it, right? I was like, yeah, I want a high commitment, you know, and then you like, but it doesn't adjust to your life, right? Like, I don't want a high commitment 100% every day for the rest of my life. There are times to grieve. There are times to be sick. There are times to get married and have kids. So I don't know, I'm getting too off track, but like there was a lot of good in there that I appreciate.
Yeah.
That drew me in. And that makes it all the more why it makes me sad that like they can't major in the good and like repent and let go of the control and the, you know, need to like I don't know, like keep you and get every drop of work out of you that they can.
Right.
I love the tribal story. That's what got me. I love the tribal story of the church. We were cool hippies in the 70s, and we started this thing, man, and we were just rebelling against the institutional church. Like my little teenage self was all over that. Like loved it, loved all of it. Wanted to be a part of it and have the inspiration of like, you know, you can be a young person and you can do this, you can have great impact. I remember thinking about legacy in my 20s because it's something that's talked about there all the time. Like you want your life to count for Christ, start now, you know? And there was an encouragement, there was a platform and an opportunity. And I have to admit, you know, after attending seminary, I didn't find anything new and exciting in seminary that I hadn't already learned in my 11 years at Xenos. And I was given a very solid evangelical worldview and view of scripture. I was taught how to study the Bible in very practical and effective ways. I was taught how to teach the Bible to others. And I was able to utilize those skills and have continued to utilize them in ministry ever since then. But I loved it that the people that were there at that time, many of them had been there since the beginning. So they would tell their stories of, hey, we got married. This was a fun one I can still remember. Hey, we got married, and when we came home, the guys in our home group took all the labels off of all of our canned goods. And so now the tradition is, you know, every time somebody gets married, when we take care of their houseplants or whatever, we take off all the labels of their canned goods. I mean, like just even things like that, especially to a kid that was adjusting to the fact that whatever family I did have wasn't that great. It allowed me to have another family. And it allowed me to have people in my life that were in it. It appeared like for the long haul.
Right. Right. So they really came on strong and trying to really be what the Bible and what New Testament Christianity is supposed to be about, as being communal, being intentional, being the people that do the one anothering, really putting with their money where their mouth is in terms of being there for you. Now, of course, admittedly, there's an awful lot of abuse and a lot of kinds of really unfortunate things that went on with that. But they did their best, and they still do, I think, from what I'm hearing, still are trying to do that. And that's important. I mean, that's a vital element to human development. I mean, and meeting you where you were there, that it sounds like the kind of place I'd like to be. And that's what we all ascribe to. But the high commitment, though, like I said, it did come with its threads, with its individual strings attached. But yeah, it was there. And can you think of other things? What specifically that? Family, the sense of family and destiny and connection and purpose. That's certainly a big draw. What other things did you see there?
I think identity was a really big thing for me. Like, I can remember talking to Ryan Lowry early on and saying, like, I have no idea who I am. Like, I really don't. And I remember him saying, like, I think people here see you a lot more clearly than maybe you see yourself. So I think when I got into philosophy and reading, the concept is called, like, to be is to be perceived. Like, you exist in the eyes of another person. And obviously you give a lot of your control away when you relegate who you are to how you're perceived and what they think of you. But that was really something that I lacked, was understanding how I stacked up, against other people and what I was good at, what I had a deficit in. So it was really important for me just knowing and having that insecurity from being, one of 4 kids homeschooled. It was really important for me to try to work on and develop an idea of where my niche would be in life and who I was and what my skills and giftings were and all of those types of things. And Xenos dwells very purposeful when it comes to ascribing a personality to you, right? Ascribing giftings. You can take an 112 questionnaire, and that was very, it was superficial looking back on it, but it was very helpful for me because it gave me something to latch on to, like, okay, maybe I don't have it figured out, but Ryan says he sees things a lot more clearly than I do. The guy that's discipling me, he says he has a good handle on things. And that was really assuring to me. So I think it was, it obviously has its negatives, right? Because, you kind of throw your lot in to, like, kind of a man-pleasing type lifestyle. But at the same time, when people are good and well-intentioned and they do things that are authentic, like pull you aside and say, wow, that was really, really cool what you did with, that kid, or wow, you went out of your way to, talk to that person or to reach out to that person, and, or, the things that make the things that are real, having somebody there alongside you to kind of bring those things out was really helpful. It was good. It was good to have people deliberately thinking about me and my growth and my development, and what I could add. And that was nice, especially coming from where I was coming from.
Right. Again, that's a really good point, Oliver. You hit on something really good. Identity, getting a grasp of who you are in relationship to others and things. And these are all marks of what happens when you are at a point in your life, and the demographic that Xenos deliberately targets, from of course, it seeks to draw into young men and women from Christian school backgrounds, but then again, it starts to really focuses on the youth, the teenager, and then obviously the college age. It's focusing on people who are at points in their developmental lives in which they are making life-changing decisions. They're at a point in their life in which they are about to make commitments. They're about to pour their best blood out, their greatest idealism, their greatest energy, their enthusiasm, their passion, and that's what it ends up becoming. It becoming an issue where you're drawn on that path, and of course, if it's beckoning enough, you're gonna go for it. It gives you roots. It gives you a story. It gives you an identity, like you said, that's really, really vital. It's something that even after people leave, it's hard to shake that, isn't it? It's hard to really shake what you've been molded into. There's an identity that they give you that is there's an identity they give you ultimately as you go by, because you're going to end up needing to comply with that. But at the same time, you're talking to young men and women who've never been challenged like that. Their parents never challenged them. Their schools never challenged them. They were never drawn into that kind of process where they reflected on it and had their own identity. But before they came to Xenos. So yeah, you're right, Oliver. That's a great point. That's a great point.
Can I tell a few nice things or good things that I experienced with actual people? Because I'd like to talk about something nice Ryan has done for me, a couple of things Dennis has done for me, and of course Jesse. And then after I say them, I want to say something to them so that they can understand why it's so good to me, and I still, you know what I mean? They might not understand why. Why, Desi? Why? Is that okay if I do that?
Sure. We're helping unpacking, understanding how that came from.
Okay. So I have a different kind of situation because I was recruited by Dennis McCullum's daughter. So I was close to the family, and I loved Dennis and I loved Jesse. So I still love Jesse. And I loved Ryan, and they all loved me. So it was kind of confusing to them, I'm sure. But I do want to say that Dennis did a couple wonderful things for me.
Sure.
And the first thing was when I was in high school, I had my own apartment, and that's a long story, so we'll just move by that. And there was something dangerous going on in my apartment. Long story short, I had to go out my window at night, and I was 16. And I lived on a really bad street. I shouldn't have been a 16-year-old girl walking around at night. And I didn't know what to do, so I waved down a pizza car, and I asked them to take me to my grandma's house. So they took me there, and that was also bad. And she wasn't there, and I couldn't believe it. But apparently, they went to Cedar Point and spent the night there. But what happened was I went to a neighbor of hers, a stranger, knocked on the door, and back then they had these phones on the wall that they could bring out to you. So they brought it out, and I called my best friend Echo, and they just weren't there. So I called Jessie, and her dad right away came and got me from that situation. And so that's. I just want to make sure people know Dennis does good things. I mean, not always, but and then also I was starting a ministry house of my own where I just took in girls and helped them through troubles in their life and move on with things. And I couldn't really afford to start this house. And not everyone supported me doing this because I was so rebellious. But he put the down payment for this thing that I was doing on my own that a lot of people didn't believe I could do, and he did that for me too. So I just want to make clear that I had a different relationship with them than some people have. And Ryan, I remember I was walking down High Street or something, going to a Bible class or walking, I don't know, whatever. And someone came by. My brother had got me this cross, and he passed away later he passed away. But it was very special that he gave it to me. And a man came by while I was talking to Ryan, and he ripped it off my neck and ran off. And I was so excited. It was startling for us both. It was just so fast. And he was so sweet because the next time I saw him, he had bought me another cross. Mm-hmm. And so I want to explain why, after they treated me so good, that I decided they were cult leaders. And the reason is, after I found out I was in a cult in 2018, after I read all of these stories, I was obsessed with information to find out where the problem was. And the more information that I got from former members and digging around Reddit and everything like that, I just found a pattern, and I found where it led, and I was just so disappointed because I wasn't thinking I was going to go find out that my favorite people are the ones doing the most damage. But I had to accept that that's where it went. Jessica was a very good friend to me, a best friend. I still love her. And she really never did anything wrong to me until I left. And that happens to everybody. So I don't feel singled out by that. I feel like it was a little crueler than she had to be. And she slut-flamed me. But I mean, that's what they do. But yeah, I have a funny one for later. But they also, my home group, when my brother passed away, they came and they removed all his stuff for my mother, who was just beyond herself, and I was too. It's my brother, and it was just so kind that all these guys just came over and they moved it, and they made it as easy as possible for us moving past that time. And not only that, they gave him a beautiful funeral, and these beautiful musicians, and one that's still in there, sang this beautiful song, "Wayfaring Stranger." It's a favorite of mine, and it was the most beautiful thing. And then my mom was so comforted by this, that she sent a card to these girls every year until she died. And then when she did pass, even though one of the girls who sang that I still have contact with is still in Xenos, she still came and sang for my mother's friends the same song that that was for my brother. So
wow. Okay.
So they've done wonderful things.
Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm. Kind things.
Mm-hmm.
And Raphael, I think that's why it's so painful, because there's so much value, right? So there's so many foundational things that people need to figure out in their life, and there's so many of those blocks that people in Xenos helped me put into place, in my foundation per se. And when that's ripped away from you, because you fail or because you can't, stack up to whatever the expectations are, it's devastating. It really is, because there are things that that are valuable. I think, you know, this podcast that we're doing is kind of a response to the idea that we're just a lot of disgruntled, bitter people. I don't think I was ever bitter. You know, I think I was always just went through like stages of grief. You know, it was like losing a best friend, you know, and I think for years I looked back on it as my failure, and I had nothing but positives to say, like, wow, those are the people that made it. I couldn't. You know, I had a lot of mental health issues and went to a lot of counseling and therapy and stuff, and had to shore up a lot of things in my life. And I remember for years looking back and like, you know, they're the ones that could keep going and I couldn't. So there was a lot of shame and grief and sorrow and just sadness. There was not a lot of bitterness, you know. And that's, I think, the unfortunate thing. When people look at us, they're like, wow, they're just bitter and they have an axe to grind. No, like we have I can look back at the things that people were able to help me do and see them for what they were.
Right.
And in my situation, I idolized those people until I grew and matured, and then started to realize, okay, you know, wait a second, that was too far, you know, or that was wrong, or that was callous and harsh, or that was, you know, very controlling and manipulative. You know, it was only when, you know, I was able to kind of not destroy that idol, but look at it objectively. After years of separation, was I able to actually start bringing forward some criticisms. Most of the time it was just, you know, just not self-loathing, but just an idea that, you know, I was the issue or the one to blame. And there's two things that have helped me. You know, the first being that I don't feel like I've ever stopped being blessed by God. And I was pretty convinced that would stop after I was gone. You know, I mean, he gave me a great wife that people in Xenos told me was sent by Satan to distract me. I've got two awesome kids, you know, that are just healthy and just amazing, teach me things every day. I had a great job. When I was kicked out of the church, my friend Calvin, who was still in the church, came to my house, and I had interviewed and could not get a job, and was just like, you know what, I quit. You know, I'm just going to go work for my dad, and, you know, just, I can't do this. And he stayed over the night at my house and woke me up the next day and helped me get dressed, and then drove me to the interview and made me take it. And that was an amazing blessing in my life. It was, you know, a real job and a step in a career and all that kind of stuff. And that was because somebody from Xenos had a vested interest in my success, like a real interest in my success. So I don't look back with bitterness. I really don't. I think the anger has come in, and that's been when I've seen people, how wronged people are, you know, and how there's no reconciliation, there's no acknowledgement of those things. And that's been, my sister lived with me recently for 3 or 4 years after she got out of a relation or a marriage with one of the men that Dennis discipled. And just seeing how damaging their relationship was, and seeing how my sister could never get any support for what she was going through, and how everyone always sided on the other side of the fence. And that's where I think the anger came in, but it was never, I guess, personal animosity that I held on to with people.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just think that's a misconception that a lot of people have. Like,
Yeah.
for me to stay angry for 20 years and then decide to rehash things. Thankfully, I'm not that kind of person. And thankfully, that's not what this is about. It's about helping people to say, okay, there are some good things, but, you know, when it went from, hey, maybe go to college, you could do this, man, to go to college and study this, you know, and don't take any more classes than this. And when you're at classes, make sure you sit and you're purposeful and you do this with this person and you bring this person around, you know, that's where it gets a little damaging and controlling.
Right.
But there are some good foundational things that people helped me develop.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'll be right back. I gotta go get a charger.
Okay, sure. And the tragic thing is that, you know, when Xenos gave you guys a narrative full of absolutes that jived with you, you know, along with you being provided meaning, you being provided purpose, you being provided fellowship, community, connection. You got fellowship. You grew, you blossomed under that personally as human beings. But then they began integrating that seamlessly into their own authoritarian narrative, by which, as you said, Oliver, they extended just these illegitimate forms of control that became destructive, and with some people they became almost fatal. Especially when it came down to unhealthy marriages and relationships and personal choices, autonomy. I mean, one of the things that, you know, I wrote, and I you know me, I don't spare in my pen. Okay, when I've written and I've spoken, I speak very deliberately, and I choose the words very deliberately, what I say. And everything I've read and everything I've heard about Xenos, everything I've heard from people like you, things I've heard, experienced firsthand testimony, shows me, there's a tremendous amount of arrogance, a tremendous amount of just pride and control that the leadership of Xenos seems to really exalt themselves with. But yet at the same time, while they do that, you know, they use what is so praiseworthy in terms of establishing a system by which young men and women are brought into their orbit in the same way you all have. And that's really, you know, they mean, in a sense, it's kind of sick because they really mean well. But they really, I think, are really convinced that in order for you to disciple people, you have to walk all over them. You have to treat them like a doormat, and you use the most basic building blocks of human society and community to do that. So are people mad over that when they leave? Are they hurt? Are they crushed? You better believe they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because they're jealous. They want to be the next Dennis McCallum. It's because because there's personal life that's been ruined by the choices of that. And it's always done, as they say, it was all done with good intentions. But as we all heard the old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's the tragic thing of it all. It resonates with me when I Desiree was the first person I ever met who had come on Xenos and 2 years ago, and more people totally unlike her, individuals, personalities, all individual, but they all told the same story.
Mm-hmm.
They all loved what was going on, and they mourned over leaving, over having to suffer what they did, because they felt where they were was so right and so good. So Oliver, that's I really appreciate you sharing that, because that really is what it comes down to. People are angry. People are speaking out because they want to see wrongs righted. They want to see change, and we have there's a leadership there in Xenos from Dennis McCallum on that refuses to even consider that there's some of that what was said. There might be more to it going than what they really want to admit. I mean, they come off with this candid kind of kind of atmosphere where when they're speaking about how there's just this going on and that going on. Yeah, we've had a little bit of abuses here, but by and large, we are just sailing right along. Well, that is so obviously disconnected from the truth.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I was reminded of is like those personality tests that you talked about, Oliver. I loved it that mine came up as like one of the preferred. There's definitely a hierarchy of like which personality types are kind of preferred. And I was excited that I was like one of the preferred. And
right.
I mean, it really felt good. It felt like, oh my gosh, I have a leg up. Like just how God made me is awesome sauce. So now I can be a leader. I can, initiate and people will follow. And this is cool. And until I found out that sometimes the preferable characteristics are more preferable with men than women. Mm-hmm. So that was probably like the time that I could honestly say I was most disenchanted, but it wasn't when I left. It was when I was still there, and when my idealism was broken down. Because the crux of the matter for me was a situation where Dennis called me a curse word in front of a large meeting. And my hope was, well, he'll apologize and it'll all be fine. Mm-hmm. Like, we'll work it out because that's just what we do. Like, we're the church, we're family, we're all together. And instead, it was meeting after meeting of him feeling very justified in it and unwilling to bend. Mm-hmm. And the people that did love me, that wanted to bless me as I was there and also blessed me as I left. Like I didn't have the experience that a lot of people did when they left Xenos. I left with about 20 other people. And then after that, there were maybe 1,000 or 1,500 that left after that. I had the blessing of Dana and Carol Donnell and Scott and Trish Kell, who were my home church leaders at the time, who challenged Dennis personally, individually, and then together, according to Matthew, and gave him an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And the opportunity passed. But I'm disgruntled and ungodly. No. Disappointed and sad. Yeah. But something that I really have felt really restored. Mm-hmm. In the relationships that I've built with the people that have gone through similar things. Mm-hmm. Because even though we've all landed in different places, mm-hmm. I really believe that it's, God himself that has brought us back to this place so that we can have fellowship with one another, mm-hmm. the way that it was intended to start with. And we don't have those expectations of one another that we have to control one another. We really trust God with each other. And we're all very much in different places. And it's worked out fine. Des and I couldn't be any more different, but we rock it in that group. Like, I feel like we're a good team. And I don't know Oliver. I want to know Oliver more now that I've had a chance to talk with him. But I've gotten to know Katie, and we have the Lord might even be making our paths intersect again in a more substantial way here in the future. God has kind of given us a similar burden for some people here in Columbus. So who knows what's coming, but for the people that I love that are still there, I think of the movie The Money Pit, and maybe you guys have never seen it. I'm just that old.
I've seen it.
That's a hilarious movie. Yeah.
Yeah. But
that's a great movie.
I think of that movie, you have something that looks beautiful and seems to be functional, but you keep investing in it. And you realize that you're only there because you're trying to save what equity you've put in it so far.
Mm-hmm.
And friends that I know that are still there that I love, and I'm going to name check people since Des did. I love Jeff and Kathy Body. Without them, I wouldn't have had like parents for the beginning part of my adult life. People like them, they've invested their entire lives, and the whole concept of leaving would seem like they wouldn't have a clue about how to do it. And they really do, I think in many cases, believe the things that are being told, like that we are just all hot messes on fire. And we're not. We're all actually really normal people that had an encounter together and may have crossed paths with Jesus, but for whatever reason, we've been brought back together again.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish that
interesting.
I wish that they knew that us. I wish they knew us. I'm sorry, but I wish they knew us now, I guess.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry for jumping in, but I really, really like what you're saying. Like, the really cool thing about the group of people that have walked out, and like I've got tons and tons of friends that haven't even joined yet. Mm-hmm. But what's really amazing to me is the difference in political beliefs, the difference in lifestyle choices, the difference. I mean, people are atheists, people are agnostic, people are religious. It's amazing to me that there's such diversity of thought, and there are obviously the negative things that bring us together, but then all of the really positive things, like you were alluding to, that bring us together too. Like, the things that we saw in Xenos initially, community, fellowship, friendship, discipleship, and that sort of mentorship, that sort of thing. So I really, when the group popped up a few years ago, I really thought, I was like, man, I'm going to join this, and it's going to be a really big negative for me, because it's going to be filled with bitter people who just want to bash the church and just want to, be negative and bitter and wallow in misery and all this. And I want to move on, and I want to grow, and I want to, and it's been nothing but positives, people supporting each other, people meeting each other where they're at, people acknowledging hurt, people with incredible gentleness offering advice and support and empathy, people meeting, people reading each other's stories and jumping in, and it's really cool to see that the healing has taken place there. And in terms of the whole idea of like the money pit, and I was there for 2 or 3 years with a co-leader of mine, and she and I were there because we were going to change things from the inside, right? And I think a lot of people there see the negatives and see the systemic issues and say, okay, well, we'll start a mini revolution within the revolution, right? And
You're not the first I've heard say that, Oliver.
Yeah.
You're not the first one. There's so many people I think in there that you ever would think. You know that.
And that's where you run into the ironclad control, right? Dennis called our home church the licentious ones, is how he came to talk about us, because we wanted to do things differently. And I would get calls from other home church leaders, and they would say, hey, is Jeff hanging out with you guys? Like, he's running from the Lord's discipline over here at this group. You need to like kick him out and send him back, all this kind of stuff. But we saw the failure and the lack of forgiveness, the lack of grace, the lack of ability to remove like the expectations, to let people rest where they were. And we wanted to do things different, but that got found out, and that got, yanked back into, rebuked strongly and that sort of thing. So, we did try to, well, shoot, we've got 7 years invested in this. This is all of our friends. This is our work. This is our lives. Let's make this work, right? Every single person that I've talked to has gone through that thought, and unfortunately, at the end of the day, it doesn't. You can't change the system. It's pretty rock solid, unfortunately.
Right. Because of those absolutes that we spoke of. The whole system is set up where it's a factory. It's a religious factory. You've become replicants in the Blade Runner kind of way. You literally become stamped out to become clones of one model and one way of doing things. And when you're in a situation where you're involved with it because you believe in all of the things that got you involved with it, then when it comes right down to it, you're gonna be just brutally confronted with the harsh reality of what that system really is and where it's really been taking you. And of course, when you leave it, when you split, when you realize you realize that there's a reality beyond that. You think about movies. I think of you remember watching the one great movie that I like to watch is the Truman Show. It's when Truman realizes that things aren't what they seem to be in his closed little perfect bubble world. Everybody's watching him. The whole world's his fan base. He doesn't even know it. He's being watched, and then he realizes things aren't what they are, and then all suddenly his whole life begins to change because they're trying to screw down control over him to put that one troublesome thought out of his mind. But he does it, and what does he do? He almost dies trying to escape the bubble, but he makes it. And even when he walks out with his typical, say good night, good morning, and all that, deep down inside, once he got outside in the arms of his lover and they found each other, I'm sure he had some decompression he had to live through. And that's why people are angry. That's why people are upset. And that's kind of a proverb to tell why people are upset with leaving. People speak out because they're angry, and more else they're hurt, they're crushed, they're grieving. When you grieve a loss like something like Xenos, yes, as horrible as it can be, it still was a source of life. It was a center of the universe for all of you. You leave it, you realize what it is, and as a human being, you're gonna have to deal with this unbelievable loss in some way. You're gonna grieve. You're gonna break down, and it's gonna manifest in a million different ways in different people. And when you grieve, sometimes you say and do things that you really wouldn't do any other way. But it's your way of trying to deal with the loss. And unfortunately, people who look at ex-members such as yourself, and they look at you and they say, well, look at you ungodly and disgruntled people. Well, what kind of God are you talking about here? What kind of God are you comparing to? Because people are grieving a loss. So who set the person up to know what even God is at that point? See, you folks have been through hell, and it's a tragic thing, but like you said, Oliver, I think you've gone on and you're connecting with people and you're seeing. I mean, I'm not a member of this group. They think some of them think I am, but I'm not. I was never in Xenos, never was. But from what I understand, and I've met quite a number of you folks outside the online status there, you guys have an awesome life. You're doing your best to live life the best you can. And I'm glad, Desiree, you were the first one I had a chance to meet doing that. And Oliver and Julie and Katie, I'm so glad you guys were a part of all that. So you really have.
Turns out we're okay.
Turns out you're okay. Yep, exactly. So what it was in terms of that, as we're going to start winding down, I told you it might be an hour. Let's just want to keep going. In terms of that, it turns out you're okay, right? What were some of the things that you let me ask you that. That's a very interesting point you bring up. In terms of leaving Xenos and like I said, some people got the right for the fellowship anyway and got booted out. Some people left. What after you leave a movement like Xenos, after all those positives were just suddenly just overturned, how do you rebuild? What other positives can you look beyond that? What have you guys done to kind of like reconnect yourselves with that shattered truth in your own lives?
Well, I'll say that I'm not doing okay because I still have nightmares of being shunned, and I don't like being in groups of large people. I can't ever go to another church. I mean, the idea of it terrifies me. Like, I have a phobia.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say I'm totally okay. My life's way better.
Right.
But I have baggage from the things that happened there. Oh, and I also wanted to correct that when I was talking about Dennis and them, and they never did me wrong until I left, it was because I was in another home group. And that home group did a lot of damage, so I didn't want to think it sounded like nothing ever bad happened. I meant like the whole system of theirs trickled down, even though, so it took me a long time to figure out that,
right.
Yeah,
everybody's a work in progress. Everybody is.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Well, that's one of the really hard things to get beyond, because when you're in the church, the idea of like sanctification and arriving and stuff, and for me it was like being a leader, being a home church teacher, being a cell group leader, being a house leader. You've arrived or whatever. There's not a humility and an idea that you still have a long way to go. And that's one of the things that's so scary, or was so scary for me, was thinking like, okay, I don't have anything together, but people are looking to me like I have things together, and but it's really hard once you leave to then think like, okay, it's okay not to have anything together. And that thought while I was there, even though people are like, oh man, you're discipling 5 people, you're leading a house, you have 12 people, new people come out to your group, oh, that teaching was just amazing, yada. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean what Xenos thinks it means, right? It doesn't mean you've arrived or you're further along or anything like that. Somebody can, I can go pay somebody $50 to come to a meeting, right? And they'll hear the word of God, and but I guess what I'm saying is, once you're out and once you're away, cutting yourself some slack, giving yourself some real grace, understanding that, or looking at things from a more neutral perspective, is all stuff that takes a lot of time for me. Medication, therapy, counseling, great family members, people in the church, who were still sneaking around and supporting me. I was, homeless. I had a friend from the church who picked me up in the middle of winter and took me to his dad's house so I could, sleep somewhere warm. I mean, these are like, amazing things that I feel like God led people to do, despite it being the party line that I was to be rejected and shunned at all costs. So
looks like somebody was listening. They talked about being compassionate, right?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of room and movement that absolutely has to take place after you're gone. And anybody, I think that's part of the problem with the people who are still there, is they buy into that lie that like, oh, I'm a 26-year-old elder, I've got, whatever. And there's a false sense of pride and a false sense of, bravado that comes with that. And it's like, man, live a little, fail a little, and maybe you can, understand and empathize a little better with some of the wrongs that maybe you've perpetuated.
Yeah. Sometimes a little bit of humility works, doesn't it? Sorry, Desiree. Go ahead.
I was out for 10 years before I knew I was in a cult, at least 10. And in the beginning of that, I was a total shit show, and it's just a total shit show. And throughout that whole 10 years, before 2018, when I learned of Xenosverse.com, I believed that I was apostate, and I believed that I couldn't talk to God anymore because I was told I never truly accepted Christ. And it was a very dark 10 years. Well, not all of them, because when I met my husband and my kids and all that. But I mean, I was just such a mess, and I could not get better until I read all the stories on Xenosverse.com. All of a sudden, I just realized what had happened to me. Like, I'm not apostate. I'm not a spiritual loser. I'm not going to hell for faking being a Christian, like I was told. After 10 years, I faked for 10 years. But yeah, it changed everything. It changed everything when I saw what they were doing to everybody, and that it wasn't just me. Like, I didn't just fail. It was all these people went through what I went through, and I didn't even know, I just thought I deserved it all. And Xenos was just so great, and just knew I had to go back someday. But when I had the chance to go back, they never wanted me back. It was bizarre to me. When I wasn't in sin and I was married. I think it was because I just don't have anybody to bring around.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's a thing, is their idea of like a person's utility is so skewed. When I was kicked out, actually, I don't think I was ever excommunicated, but when I had left, I had a really, really, my best friend was still in the church, and he would call me up crying after meetings, and he would have been rebuked for, not praying, not speaking up, not offering whatever it was he was supposed to be saying there. And he had a different set of skills and a different set of things that he brought to the table that nobody ever understood or acknowledged or valued. And he would call me up crying, and I would go over and I would pray with him. And he would be like, man, I pick up the people and I drive them, to and from the meetings because they don't have cars. All of these like behind the scenes things, like, like I, cleaned up the house or whatever. It's like making it, and he had such a good heart, and his utility was just what he did, that somebody who was a type A-hole said, oh, this is what's important and you're not doing it. Like, he would like throw up because he was so nervous, because he had to perform, and his utility was not what they necessarily wanted or whatever. And I think that's, even though, like, I guess, like, like Desi was saying, you could go back, like, what's the utility with somebody who, had their shot and blew it? Like, maybe they look at me or something like that. Somebody that doesn't have a good story, or somebody maybe that has a good story and has some successes and stuff despite them. That's not a good story for them. Maybe they want somebody to be at rock bottom, and that's why they haven't reached out. But, I don't necessarily get the feeling I have a lot of utility to them either.
I think that's one of the things that's really hard to shake, especially if you try to join a new church or get into a new community or have friends, right? Like, this sense that it isn't just about your utility, and to trust that there are people and churches and friends that value you for you as a human being, who believe that God values you for you, and not just for what you can contribute to the system. Like, that's a really hard one to shake.
Yeah. Right. And that's something, Katie, that I think is, you're one of the, like I said, there's so many different great resources out there. Your website, leavingdwell.com. I mean, that really helps us see that there's so many people who struggle with that same horrible albatross around their neck, that they feel like that they can't touch, they can't live, they have no legitimate reason to even exist outside of Dwell. They feel totally cursed. as if the world ended when they walked out.
Yeah, I think like you asked, I think like what you did when you left, and for me, I had a real stubborn, like I felt the condemnation, right? I felt the judgment of like, well, I guess I'm condemned, and hopefully Jesus will be there with the condemned, and I'll just throw myself on his mercy and carry on. So, but I had a real stubborn sense of like, they don't get to take church from me. I had a very, I think, protective sense of like having already experienced churches before I came to Xenos, I went to the Catholics. I went to Ohio Dominican. I was like, and I went to a church that they maligned, right? I'm like, I'm going to go to the places that they judged and criticized. I'm going to go somewhere that has worship music, and I'm just going to sit there and like, and just do that. I'm going to do something different. And like, they don't own God. They don't own Christianity. Like that was where I went with it. Yeah, that was a long, slow process. I think adding in some counseling to that mix probably would have been a good idea.
Right. And
Well, for
everybody
me,
has their own way of handling it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. For me, when I left, I was part of a national ministry that traveled, and it was a parachurch organization that did trainings for churches and for educational communities. So I was part of that, and I knew as being part of a parachurch organization that going to church was non-optional for me. So I chose to attend Vineyard Columbus, which is a huge mega church here in town, but I never participated. It's like I totally loved Jesus, but his fan club was horrible, and I just didn't trust them. And so I sat, gave my 10%, sat in the back row, did my time, and until September 11th. And something about September 11th, like, really, do I want to be found still among the walking wounded when it comes to this church stuff? So I made the decision at that time to find a mentor there. And my mentor was previously in Xenos as well.
Wow. Huh.
So I found a mentor, and I ended up being at that church for 22 years before planting a church here in Columbus a few years ago. So, yeah, I mean, God has continued to be at the forefront of my life ever since I started following him. He's always been my homeboy. It's just trusting church people. Church people was so hard at first, and I grieved the loss of those years that I felt like I had no trust. I wonder what God would have done with that time.
He wastes nothing. He wastes nothing. Yeah. Go ahead, Oliver.
I was just gonna say, like, and I think that's really awesome, Julie. Like, I'm probably more in the camp with Desi, where it's like, the thought of going to church just makes me cringe. And I'm not saying that that's how you think, Desi, but just walking into a church. But it's just like, I've gone to my wife's church. We found a church in the community that we tried out, and it's like, I'm scared. Like, I don't know if I'm scared that I'll find something like Xenos, or I'm scared that I won't, but I'll want what I've had with Xenos and I won't be able to get it again, or it's the weirdest sense of like emotions and stuff. And that to me is like the biggest thing that I hope keeps people indwell up at night, is the idea that there are hundreds of people that if they could, they would walk with God or follow God or put their hearts, out and say, hey, please, Lord, heal me and help me find a community. But it's just so broken, the idea of fellowship now. And like, I hope that they think about that kind of stuff. Like my sister, like, I still have faith, and I had a faith before I came to Xenos, thankfully. And I look at my sister and it's like, she doesn't even believe in God anymore. And she doesn't believe in marriage, and she doesn't believe in relationships, and she doesn't believe that, and
I was like
it's
that.
just, it's just heartbreaking to me what you lose. You lose more than just a place with four walls, because Xenos offers a lot more than just four walls. And when some of those things are corrupted by people, and by people's sin, and by people's manipulation and coercion, and they don't even know what that does. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I really, I saw that thing from Ryan where he's like, his brow like comes together, and he has like that empathetic look that he always had in my home group. And it's like, we wish them well. It's like, buddy, get on your knees in front of God, dude, because, don't wish me well. You're my Facebook friend. Yeah. Call me up and we can talk about some of the stuff that, hey, is objectively, factually gone on in your groups that you need to repent on and get on your knees before the Lord. I wish you well too, Ryan, but it's just amazing to me the amount of destruction that's caused. And the biggest thing is I think with people, either losing their faith outright or never being able to act it out, to feel like they can act it out in an authentic, natural way, or know what that looks like. So I don't know. I think it's amazing that you've been able to do that, Julie. And it's not a place where I'm at, but it's a place where I do feel that loss of not having that. But it's like, what is the path to walk back towards that in a healthy way? So
yeah, I think the hardest thing for me, and at least initially, was exactly what you said. Like, we were taught that it was like the one true church, like the coolest New Testament church ever, the best of the best. And even to the point, like we were sent to other churches to spy on them and to learn what they do, and to come back with how much greater we were. Like, that's part of leadership training. You guys are all rolling your eyes because you all did it too. You did it too.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, this is the pool of churches we have to choose from, or the ones that we went in and critiqued harshly.
Exactly.
And and what is wild is that I thank God every day for being involved in Beauty for Ashes Ministries back in the day, because it gave me a chance to go to churches all over the United States and find out that churches were just full of human beings having human experiences with a mighty God. And they were all, everybody inside of them, they were all cracked pots, every one of them. And just like us, they were just people. And having that experience did allow me, I think, and forced me, because it was a requirement of being involved in that ministry. It did make me have to choose one, because I wanted to still be involved in that organization. But I've found since then, I couldn't imagine back then that there's so much more to Christendom than just that, my experience there. But I think about the people that are still there, and that is their only experience.
Right.
Which makes it so much harder to leave.
Right. Well, when you're the center of the universe, it's kind of hard to see the edges. It's kind of hard to see.
I guess.
And unfortunately, that's what Dennis McCallum's vision is. When you read his books and you read what he's saying, and listen to how people speak of him, and speak of the vision that Dwell puts out, it's all sounds very evangelical and ecumenical and ironical, but at its heart, it's still a universe where he is at the center and he's ruling from it, and that, of course, Xenos is obviously God's first choice. It's the pattern God set forth. No one's doing it like Xenos ever has. I mean, no one's done it since the age of the apostles. And so when like one pastor minister said so well so many years ago, he said, an infallible church, he said, cannot repent. And that's so true. A church that believes it is above question, scrutiny, above the need to reconsider its ways, there's no way it'll ever change.
Yes. So I mean, I think that like an apology, like sorry for the ways people have been hurt, is like a baby step. Like that should be a really low bar. That I would love to see leadership and Dwell be able to genuinely engage people's hurt. And that is just not even close to sufficient, right? Like I've received an apology, you know, like I've had people reach out. I can have a conversation like with people in Dwell and it's fine. It's not about my pain. It's about like genuinely repenting and having accountability for the structures that are damaging. And so, you know, if they reached out and hired Guideposts as an agency to give them an independent assessment, and like, that to me would be a sign that they're taking this seriously. And otherwise, you know, they'll just, I guess, keep having to bat down multiple, you know, stories that come out at every couple months of people getting hurt. I have one other thing I want to share before we wrap up, if that's okay.
Totally. Absolutely.
Okay. So like, I don't want to give them the props that they always get for being awesome Bible teachers. Like it's so easy and tempting to give them that, like, because they care about it a lot and they have a good form of how they do it. And I will grant them that they care about it a lot. They do it a lot and they have a good form, but their content is very problematic. And they are not the only church in this city that teaches the Bible well. And I think like I've recently had a very painful experience with my current church and have therefore been visiting lots of other churches. And it has just been a refreshing experience because even just having spent the past 16 years in a church, that doesn't say that it's the best and only church. Like it still has narrowed my sense of the greater church body, like, and the diversity that's out there. And it has just been so amazing to visit all these mainline churches, you know, Methodist churches that I would never think to have visited because, you know, they're just so dismissed, right? And then like I visit them and I'm like, this is awesome. Like I just started seminary. It is amazing. Like I am still learning things. I've left Xenos I've got 20 years of ministry under my belt since then. You know, I went and got a graduate certificate in theology. I'm back in school. Like there are still things to learn. They did not teach me everything there was to learn the time I was on the servant team. I don't know. And I really come back to thinking that, like, you know, they could have the best teachings. They can have the best replicating churches. If they do not have love, it's nothing. And absolutely. Like, that's it, right? Absolutely. Where's the love?
And that is the reason why I have come and said what I've said, why I've taken the stand I have.
Yeah.
It's because 1 Corinthians 13 makes very clear. If you can have all kinds of things, you can be all kinds of things, you can do all kinds of things, but you do not operate on the basis of God's love in everything you do, then you're nothing. You're nothing. If you teach people to hate your brother, you're a murderer, the Apostle John says. Now, this isn't Raphael, the discarded ungodly apostate, speaking here. This is the word of God. This is what the biblical standard they uphold so they wave that banner so well, but yet they won't look at what it says right there. And I agree with you, Katie. I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian minister. I've been there 30 years. I teach scripture. I have a degree. I've been through all that, and there's a lot I'm going to yet to say as I start getting back into addressing Xenos, because I've been so lost addressing the Gladstone heresy down in Cincinnati, which is their kid cousin. But yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. If you do not love, I would hope people realize that by the actions they take in treating people, even though they think they're doing God's service, the way they treat those who are hurting, those who are crushed, those who are broken, those who are struggling, when they treat people in that way, how can they be said to be truly loving when they know that outside that hothouse, what it really would be viewed by? And I'm sorry, Desiree. I'll let you have the last word. Unless you guys just want to keep rolling. We were only going to be here about an hour, but we're about an hour and a half, and that's fine. We'll go as long as you want it. But Desiree, you go ahead.
Yeah, Oliver reminded me of something really important about like Jesus and God there. When I was in there, God and Xenos meant the same thing in my brain. I mean, not at first, but after a while, that second choice is really walking the McCallum line of their what they think is the best Christianity, that they need to move to Florida because there's no Christians there and they need to save people. But anyway, I'm just joking about that. Anyway, but because if they're ministry, they shouldn't think that Florida needs another church. They're not being saved there. But I can end with a funny story about Martha McCallum. Well, it's actually a fun one for me. It's a highlight memory from Xenos that just cracks me up, and I love that memory, and it was so fun. Was me and Jesse went to, this doesn't make them look very good, but me and Jesse went to a wedding in our high school group, and we were like 16, I don't know, and we were minors. And then Jesse showed me how we could sneak the alcohol, and nobody's really going to check. And it was the first time I got drunk, like trash. And it was at this wedding, and I was a very good dancer. I was on cheerleader drill team, and I was dancing by myself on the dance floor, very well, but very trashed. And so I looked up, and I saw Martha's face, and she was just like watching me. She was like, it was the most disappointing Meemaw. Like, oh my God. And I couldn't stop laughing because it's a memory I have of her shaking her head at me in judgment that I probably deserve. But anyway, it's just a great memory. Well, Martha hated me anyway. She always said I was never going to last, and she was right, and I'm glad.
Well, Martha, I know in her own way, really had issues.
Yeah.
Putting it lightly, from every account I've heard. But I'm just thankful though that from what I understand, not everybody's like Martha and Xenos. I think there's a lot of great people there. There's a tremendous amount of. I think the vast amount of people there are incredibly great people. Just do not understand.
Especially the members.
Yeah.
Some of the leaders are narcissists.
They may be, but it's those followers, those who are being told what to think, told how to view all this controversy. It's to them that this episode has been dedicated. We want them to understand where the roots of the so-called disgruntlement really are. Is that there are people that they have left behind, that they have abandoned, that have value, are worth. Every one of you were known and loved by God, and knew you just knew you couldn't give up on that. And I'm just thankful to have had you come to your acquaintance and to have been able to help you share what it is about this movement that really resonated with you, but at the same time also really shows its painfully short-sighted limitations. So but I'll give everyone one more. Anybody want to have the last word you like to say? A quick word, under a minute or so.
I would like to say that.
Just one quick word.
I just want to tell people in Xenos in Dwell that they deserve a real church. They deserve a real church with Jesus' presence that hasn't had the lampstand removed for the harm caused there. They deserve Jesus in a real church.
I agree. I agree. Anyone else? Well, Desiree, I appreciate your saying that, because that was one of the very first things you ever told me when I met you face to face almost 2 years ago. And I am so glad that the lady at the Let's Talk About Sex got that last word in there too, because that is so true. That is so true. There's an incredible amount of scriptural warning there that I hope people in Xenos will hear. They do need a place where the real Jesus is taught.
Galatians 1.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you once again so much. I really have enjoyed this. I really appreciate you taking the time this evening, and we need to do this again some other way. That's what the Xenosverse is, through the Xenosverse casts are about. And once again, thank you for participating, and we look forward to seeing what else we can explore in future episodes to come.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. Thank you.